it's a little rugged, right, on that maturity curve. And when you go into community, it kind of starts to smooth out those rugged ups and downs and who we are. And there's just accountability in community. And so I think that's why young adults matters and young adult ministry matters, because we need to have really smart, wise, generational interest in intentional conversations so that people can learn how to not scale chaos as they leave young adult to older adult.
What's up, guys? It's Josiah Keneally. This is the Young Adults Today podcast. Pumped to have you join us for today's conversation. If you're new or newer, please subscribe, share this message. It'll help us reach more listeners with the message of young adults today. And I'll just be honest, I'm a little bit of a nerd. And today's conversation, we talk about the economy, the changing landscape of higher education, and really what we need to know about student loans, the economy, economics, and young adult demographic of 18 to 30-year-olds. Neely Taminga is our guest. She's a CEO. She's been on Wall Street for over 20 years, and she's a professor at North Central University. And we're so grateful for Neely's insight. Also, there's only a few days left and only a few spots left to join us at the Young Adults Today Leader Conference. Here's a special invitation from our team. Check it out.
Hey everybody, this is Micah with Young Adults Today. We want to invite you to the March 7th through 8th Minneapolis, Minnesota Young Adults Today Leaders Conference held at the North House. This will be an amazing opportunity for you to meet new friends, be encouraged, hear from speakers, experience worship, meet maybe your next best friend, but we just want to encourage you to get signed up. So if you're a leader and you're leading 18 to 30-year-olds anywhere throughout the U.S., maybe specifically in the Midwest or the Minnesota area, we want to extend an invitation to you where you can just come and experience community. You can experience worship, hear from some speakers, have some table time and table talk with amazing people. We can't wait to see you. You can sign up at youngadults.today/conference. Again, that's youngadults.today/conference. Well, happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to the Young Adults Today podcast. I'm Micah.
I'm Josiah Keneally. We're your hosts. This is Young Adults Today podcast. We're joined today by our friend Neely Taminga. What's up? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm just loving that we have to have this opportunity to talk about things that all three of us love deeply. We love Jesus and we love young adults. So this is really fun for me.
Yes, and we are so thrilled to have you because I selfishly love having a female guest every single time. I have to say that because we're saturated with men on this, but also there's a lot of incredible females that have been able to say yes to this podcast and speak into the audience and encourage them and challenge them. And we're just going to see what God does today, but we are going to lean into a fun conversation. And before we even do that, I would just love to hear your life story. So can you share with the audience a little bit of your story of how you got to where you are today?
Oh man, I am turning 50 soon. So that's
Nice.
a lot of years to cover. I'm going to have to give you the highlights, Micah, just by
Give me some
sheer
highlights right here.
volume.
Highlight
Sheer
reel.
volume. Let's see. Let's start with top down. I am a believer in Jesus Christ. I have been rooted in my faith since a young age. And I am a wife to Stephen. I am a mother to Samuel. And those are pretty much the three things that matter the absolute most to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also a daughter and a sister and an auntie and a niece, and I play a lot of other roles. And I have a fairly small and tight circle of people in my life who speak life into my life. A few friends at work, a few friends that I've done business with for many, many years. But, I keep it really, really tight because I need to have people who really want to just invest for the long haul, right? I mean, isn't that kind of what your tight circle does sometimes, is they're in there for the long haul? And now that I'm almost 50, I realize God's faithfulness in my life because, you start reflecting on like how he has shown up over and over again in that circle and through that circle of friends who hold you up. So I don't know, beyond that, I mean, I'm also, advise on the economy. I was on Wall Street. I teach as a professor. Those are what I do, but more they're what I do more than who I am, I think. So if the
Mhm.
question is who am I? Um, I'm a child of God and a wife to Stephen and a mom to Samuel, right? What I do, that we can unpack too.
I
Oh
love
my
it.
gosh. The sheer capacity that you have to carry all those things and do them excellently is, I mean, that could be a whole podcast episode. I'd love to dive in and drill down on a few of those things, such as the economy, because I think that 2025, early as this is going to air, there is a lot of disruption to the workforce. There's a lot of AI. I mean, just a fascinating season economically. There's a lot there and happening, and
We're
millennials
swearing in
and
of a new
Gen. Oh
president.
my
I mean,
gosh.
that's just January, people.
For sure. Before we do, one of the questions that we ask every guest, and I'd be fascinated, Neely, from your perspective, why do you believe that young adult ministry is so vital?
I think it's vital because there are only so many things you can learn in a book. I think it's vital because there's only so many things that you can learn about yourself by having conversations with just one person. When I shared about like my tight circle, it's my community. And I think so much beauty happens in community. But it's also often where we learn some hard lessons. I recently gave a devotional around like peace and conflict. And we live in a world that just inherently we live in community, and you're going to have conflict in community. And I think for young adults, I think they need, and I mean this in the most sincere way, they do need to have safer spaces in order to work out like the kinks basically of their, you know, maturity curve. It's rugged. It's a little rugged, right, on that maturity curve. And when you go into community, it kind of starts to smooth out those rugged ups and downs and who we are. And there's just accountability in community. And so I think that's why young adults matters and young adult ministry matters, because we need to have really smart, wise, generational interest in intentional conversations so that people can learn how to not scale chaos as they leave young adult to older adult. Fair?
That's so good. Yes, that's fair. I think there's a vital play in community and to know that we're not called to do life alone. And I was turning this song on the other day and I didn't even turn it on. It came on the radio and it was just like, I never knew that life was going to be so lonely. If they would have told me that XYZ, I can't remember the rest, but I was like, wow, life's not supposed to be lonely. Where we should be filtering our decisions through the people around us, from where do we live, who do we date, the jobs that we say yes to, the travel we say yes to, the colleges and universities, our spending habits become a reflection of the people that we surround ourselves with. And when we understand the stat that 18 to 35 years old, you're making 85% of life's biggest
Hmm.
choices.
Hmm.
So when you take that into consideration, you're like, holy cow. So after 35, I only have 15% of life's choices to kind of unpack. And what I made in those 12 to 17 years, holy moly, either it's going to be gold or it's going to feel like I'm falling behind. And that can be financially, that could be family wise, that could be dreams and aspirations. But when it comes to just like what you've seen, Millie, with the millennials and Gen Z, I'd be curious to kind of hear like what you've been able to hear, see, witness when it comes to Distill, or even as a college professor when it comes to the economic well-being of young adults at large. And that's from student loans, maybe employment, first-time home buying, which was crazy to do back in 2019 and still a wild ride if people are still trying to buy. So what other trends are you seeing, or what do you have to say about any of that?
Lot.
That's
It's my
good. I want to
life's
hear it.
work. It's my life's work, both, both hats, both economist and professor, right? Like it's my life's work. Um, Let me start simply. Let me start actually clinically. The US economy is a consumer driven economy. Not all economies are. Some economies are oil driven or manufacturing or agrarian, right? But we are a consumption driven economy. For the United States of America to do well, we need consumption to do well. That's our lot in life. Okay. We can't change that. That's just what the reality of our country's economy is. Now, consumption, I think in some circles is viewed as a nod to someone's status in life. And I think in others, it's like, no, that's how I just live and work and engage in my community, right? Consumption's a byproduct of community. And so I'm not putting a value placement on like to be an overly consumptive or an underly consumptive economy. I'm just saying for the American dream to work, you need consumption in the economy. Now, all consumers, though, that's all of us, all 330 million of us, right? 160 million households. We're first laborers. Like you don't have consumption without labor. And so, where I think a lot of traditional economists will focus on just the labor economy or just the consumer economy, what makes Distill very unique is we have views and perspectives on the consumption economy by looking at what's going on in the labor economy. We connect the two. And we think that there's merit to doing that because all consumer spending begins with an economic reality and it contemplates a life stage priority. And those life stage priorities will change. And so your consumptions will change and your labor, your ability to earn wage changes as you age as well. So it's very integrated to what our consulting practice is. But before you get there, think about it. One of the many joys, I have many joys of teaching, but one of the many joys I love teaching in that university level is it's right there when they're like baby laborers and baby consumers, right? They're about to launch onto like a 40-year trajectory of their labor contribution to the United States of America. And so I would rather have the opportunity to influence my hands and my mind and my feet and my attention and my intentionality where we can see fruits of them scaling for good instead of scaling for chaos. How many times have we worked in workplaces where a bad manager makes really bad business? Not on my watch. I don't want that. Not on my watch. So I have a lot to say on this topic. We might need to unpack some of that, but I will say to sum up the statement, all consumer spending begins with a laborer, right? Like who you are and how you labor. And that's why I like investing in that labor pool.
Oh my gosh.
I love this already.
There's companies, Neely, that I've studied in leadership where one hiring philosophy for a lot of great organizations is find people who are just graduating, invest in them, start them in the company, and then help them kind of unlearn some things. And really, you get the opportunity to shape them. And that's worked at GE. That's worked at a lot of great leadership factories. You could call it that. And, but where I want to ask you this is I just think of a few weeks ago, a Thursday morning men's group that I'm a part of. We do confession of sins, scripture reading, prayer requests. And we went around the table and I'll never forget this. It was like prayer after prayer request. My workplace is toxic. I need a job. I am not passionate about my job. And so why does work matter and how does our faith connect with our work?
So good. And we've been there. And so I'm not going to make a blanket statement saying that this is the hallmark answer, right, to all of this. But I will say a trajectory in my own life, my own work life. So I think you might know for 20 years I was on Wall Street and then I left Wall Street, started a consultancy. And a Wall Street life is exactly as most people probably see portrayed in movies and what have you. It is intense. You'll see stories. I mean, there's even stories this week in the Wall Street Journal around like how people have had to take alternative substances in order just to maintain their 120-hour work week type style
Totally.
and what have you. And it can be like that. I'm grateful it was not that way for me, but like I certainly observed it in the industry. I'll just leave it there. And I was on the road probably upwards of 35 weeks out of the year,
Wow.
from a traveling perspective. It also provided financially in a way that I was able to, step away from it in my 40s. And that was, also a blessing. And now the Lord has done something with that. But so I understand what toxicity is not because my employer was toxic, but because even just the conditions can be toxic.
Mm-hmm.
What changed for me in many ways was this perception of purpose. I think you guys talk a lot about purpose, and I think that's wise to talk about purpose. When you lose who you are, or maybe I'll say it real specifically, to whom you belong, right? That is when I think we lose the the will to kind of do the things we need to do to kind of get things done, or we put too much pressure on ourselves for certain things, or we allow ourselves to get actually weak on skills. So, you know, I had to learn how to advocate for myself. Instead of just being told what to do and then do those expectations, at some point I had to learn in my 40s, like, okay, I'm happy to do X, Y, Z. I've also been asked to do this. How would you prescribe me to be able to do both? Oh, I get a second employee to work with me? Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, so sometimes we just have to also learn that there is self-advocacy that needs to occur, and maybe we feel like we don't deserve it or we won't get it, and so we don't want, who wants to sign up for something when they know they're going to fail? So I guess the question I have back to you guys is, do you think it's a lack of knowledge? Is it a lack of skill, that people kind of render themselves into that place of, work is against me? Um, or do we think that there is maybe a recentering on the virtue side that needs to occur around recentering what our purpose is and to whom we actually belong to? I don't know the answer to that. I think it's different for everyone. So it's not, I don't want to come across as being judgy, but I think it's an opportunity for assessment.
Yeah, totally. I think the answer is yes, if you're asking us the question. I think that, well, I think so many times we work with young adults and they're just like, I still know my purpose or I don't know who I am. And I'm like, okay, when you start reading the Word of God, you will soon discover who you are and whose you are in Christ. You will look at scripture to know that you have a gift, a talent, you have time. And what are your passion points that God has already put into you? Because you're naturally wired. If you love hospitality, oh my gosh, then go crazy in the hospitality world. Like that could be your world that you change for the better. If you love teaching and education, you might be in the classroom or you might be equipping people with CPR classes or whatever it is. You might be a personal trainer and fitness instructor in that industry. So I think it goes down to this layered answer of yes, you do have purpose, but what are you passionate about and what gives you joy throughout the job? And granted, not every day is going to be perfect. Not everything within that job description you're going to love and be like, wow, today was a 10, that is in a perfect utopia. Let's get real. But when you start unpacking scripture and purpose and you start dedicating and inviting God into your daily calendar of saying, okay, Lord, not your will, but mine, interrupt it divinely. Like, I was a personal trainer, and the people that would come through, I worked on a college campus affiliated with like the Parks and Rec. So I was with 18 to 24-year-olds every day, and they would come to my class, and I was like, okay, I just get to be a bright light in this dark place. And then they come to young adult ministry, and they see me teaching and preaching on a stage on a Thursday night, and people are like, are there two of you? Like, what is going on here? So they're able to see that you could live for Jesus even in the secular world and in the marketplace. And people begin to question and ask, like, well, how do you do that? What does that look like? So my purpose, not only in the kingdom of God, but my purpose of my skills and talents are being utilized. And I'm being sharpened in both worlds, even though it's the same world, because I think so many times we've come across young adults that try to separate, this is who I am on a Sunday. This is who I am with my friends, and this is who I am in the workplace. And then when it really comes down to it, you become a chameleon Christian and you don't know who you are and you don't know whose you are. And then you start losing that purpose. So I think it's this layered question. You have to feed the right thing. Like what you feed grows and what you starve dies. So learning and unpacking those layers too.
Well, when you say feeding, I think of food for a second. And I think that like most of us would almost look at, say, fast food as like beneath us. But a few people have kind of looked at it as serving and an opportunity and hospitality. And I'll name names. I think of Danny Meyer with Shake Shack and his concepts of hiring well. And then during the pandemic, he was talking about like we onboard people well. We're now in a crisis. We need to offboard people well. The Kathy family and Chick-fil-A, there's no perfect leader or anything, but I've been deeply inspired by Shake Shack and how they lead and just studying some of their framework for how, like you're serving burgers and doing it with joy. Chick-fil-A, we go there and who doesn't like to go there? There's a lot of us that respect them for being closed Sunday, but then secretly wish they were open because it's delicious. But I look at like the Kathy family and saying, like, you know what? It's our pleasure to serve you. And so, Neely, where I go with it is almost part Timothy Keller looking at it as every good endeavor
That's good.
and to say that, you know what? Like, my dad was a jeweler. And so it's more of a product than a service, but there's going to be a spirit of excellence and there's going to be the joy that if it was Jesus and his assignment was the joy that was set before him, that was my dad's whole, he had that hung on his jewelry bench as a reminder for the joy that was set before him. He endured the cross. And so looking at it as like part my dad, part Timothy Keller, and then like almost like this note or flavor of Chick-fil-A. And then the best, like the Ritz-Carlton, they say my pleasure. Where'd they get it? Chick-fil-A. So I think we need to have this attitude of like, whoa, there is no perfect workplace, but I'm not going to show up and tolerate. Like, I love what you said of not on my watch, because I can just put up with nonsense, or I could actually change culture and say, man, this is an honor to be here. And there's some good, bad, ugly, but we don't have to just tolerate it. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think you're spot on. Yeah, I think you're spot on about that. I think what we're one thing that we're all saying in commonality when I'm kind of just synthesizing our views on this would be there's an element of approaching your work, finding the dignity in everyone, right? That you are encountering. And even if you never encounter someone that day, something you do will eventually encounter someone that day. You can actually approve paperwork, right? Or, give feedback knowing that someone eventually will be affected by that work. And so there's dignity literally in work. There's work, when you believe in the creation sequence, there's a lot of debate about, is it 7 days, 20 million years? Like, I'm not even here to debate all that. I don't know. It's all a mystery to me. But there is a sequence of creation. And the sequence in creation is that work was in the garden before the fall of man. Work was intended to be good. We were intended to reflect the creator and create and do good work. It's a funny little side tangent here, but in one of my classes, I teach one of the entry-level business classes, which is a joy for me because I get the babies of the babies, right? And they have to present their work, and of course, they are always a little intimidated to present. And one thing that I share with them is still to this day, I do this before I hop on a podcast or before I go like on TV when I'm getting called on, for TV. I say a little mantra in my head. I actually find anything in a room that could look like a cross, right? Whether it's the lines of a brick, it doesn't matter. Like by the way, there's a cross in every room if you really look for it.
Wow.
So
And
Wow.
it, and then I say this mantra in my head. I just say, I'm created by the creator to do good work, not perfect work. Perfect work belongs to the creator. I am his perfect work made perfect in him. And when I say that, it reminds me of to whom I belong to, the work of my hands, the limitation, actually, the work of my hands. So I don't feel like I ever need to deliver perfect because I'm made perfect in God. And that is releasing. So sometimes when I think people are having a hard time, are they approaching it with knowing that there's dignity in everything that they do, literally everything that they do, because they're created to give dignity and to be dignified. And then are they approaching their work to the capital D, dignified, right? I mean, that is, if you get those two things kind of in your head, I actually think a lot of things fall into place. That would be my
so
assessment.
good. I feel like we just sat in one of your classes, just right there, a little snippet.
I love it.
I love it.
Love it.
And speaking of work, Um, we're just seeing a lot of change happen.
And a disruption.
Yes, just economically on this scale, and young adults we come across, pastors we come across, just anybody actually that we come across, our neighbors living right next door, for crying out loud. But when it comes to work, do you think the future is fractional, whether that's bivocational pastors, the gig economy, side hustles, startups? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Anything come to mind?
A lot comes to mind. I think the human desire to create is strong. And companies, organizations would be wise to ensure they have space for creation. If they are not, that will to create will be transposed elsewhere. So you have the first rights, if you're an employer, you have first rights of refusal on that creative energy. Are you using it wisely? Question mark. If you're not, you can't shade someone if they're going to go out and create. I think we're wired to create, to expand. And if someone is not in that mindset, very likely they're in a fixed to not a growth mindset. And perhaps we need to either cast vision, improve some skill sets, rewire kind of purpose, that sort of thing. I actually think every single human born in this world has the ability to create, and I think they probably even have the will to create. And that is, I view organizations, including church organizations, if they are not allowing for opportunities for that expansionary activity in someone, they will attract what they can find.
That's good.
And right? I mean, so yes, I actually think every organization needs to approach it as I have, if they have 1,000 employees, I have 1,000 people who can unleash creative energy. How am I organizing it optimally as the steward of those 1,000 employees? Am I actually organizing it in such a way that gives dignity, gets the job done, but gets it done in such a way that is most maximized?
Oh
So
my gosh, I'm putting there's lead pastors, there's board members, there's business leaders who listen to this podcast, and I'm putting their hat on for a second and reminded of a Craig Rochelle quote that I deeply just sense is true, that you can have control or you can have growth. It's difficult to have them both. And so I'm thinking of the leader who's like, maybe they've got 10, Neely, or maybe they got 50 or 1,000 teammates, volunteers, full-time staff, employees, whatever. But they're asking the question, okay, we probably have a little bit too much control right now. We're longing for growth. And then what you just said a second ago about the desire that humans, employees, teammates have to create is strong. How, like maybe any thoughts, one or two or a few on how can a leader empower people to do creative things, to have some freedom and flexibility to research, to develop, to discover, but remain on mission, on vision, and not go off course or you know what I mean? Like have there be vision leak in the process?
it's a great question. I mean, Google actually has a model for this. I think they call it the 10%, maybe something like that. You might have to research that to for me to be affirmed on it. But yeah, I would routinely just inherently do it during my Wall Street years, where I would spend usually about 4 to 6 hours a week, either reading, something to kind of expand my mind outside of the core of my work, or specifically go do site visits. I was a retail analyst, and so like I'd go visit concepts I did not actually cover to ensure that I was looking at other ways of doing other things. Um, I, I'm sure that someone somewhere in some Greek history probably already figured all this out. But, we always like to renew old ideas and call them new things.
Totally.
But the idea is just being intentional with your time to go expand your mind in other ways so that you stay fresh about what's out there. two points on that. One is I deliberately teach in the macroeconomics class that I teach. A big chunk of the grade actually comes from a daily discipline of reading current events, but not just reading current events, reading it with a critical thinking kind of. I give them a questionnaire basically to respond to. And it's, how does this relate to the economy? What statistics were in there? What was the data source for those statistics to teach, data literacy? What terms were new to you? And they actually get docked if they say nothing was new to me. Well, then you didn't expand yourself enough to an article that would have challenged you, right? So, there is that. And then the last question is this prompt of, if you had time to ask questions about this article, what would you ask? And I think constantly, and I have students who will say like that really does retrain their brain because we make it such a daily habit to rethink how they're observing the world. And that's really the goal, is to get them into this growth mindset to kind of observe the world. I think all of us could use that exercise in a lot of things. But here's what's interesting. The second thing I want to say about it. Where do you get the time? There's 8,760 hours in a year. There's an extra 24 in a leap year. We all have the same amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone says to me, I don't have time, I always say, no, you have chosen your attention.
So good.
Right?
I'm clapping over here. Silent
Right.
clap.
We all have the same amount of time. You have chosen your attention.
Yeah, that's good.
And so you have to do, I think, and I do this in one of my classes, we do an attention audit, not a time management audit, not a time audit, we do an attention audit. And ever since the birth of the iPhone, we all know we probably average an unconscionable number of hours per week that we spend on that thing. I'm guilty of it. Like I'm 100,000,000% guilty of it too. But I have no right telling anyone I don't have time for as long as there's a double digit on that number on my phone in terms of hours. So, we have time. We need to be intentional with our attention. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So good. Well, I'm just reminded. So Josiah and I had the opportunity of co-teaching a class this last semester to young adults, and there was like 22 in the class. And I said, hey, does everybody willing to take out their phone and do an exercise? And they're all like, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, okay, now go to your settings and find how many hours you've been on your phone on average. They're like, no, what? I'm like, hey, you all said yes. This is not an infringement on anybody's privacy. If you all, which you did, verbally agreed to it, just share it. It's not a big deal. But the lowest is probably 2.5 hours. And the most we had in the room was one person had 14.2 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so embarrassed. And he goes, I had the most. And I was like, you know what? We all have 24 hours in a day. It's just, what are we going to do with it? Whether you're listening to podcasts, whether this is schoolwork, whether this is scrolling, it could be
content
work.
creation.
Well,
yeah.
And it also could be Netflix and all these other things, right? So, I mean, it just brought forth this awareness to these 22 young adults that are like, oh my gosh, like I need to start stewarding things a little better. And it's not a shame. It's like taking a personal inventory of looking at, what do I prioritize? My phone is going to tell me that weekly update that I get every single Sunday while I'm sitting in church, as you were on Insta or you were on the social media for 2.3 hours a day. It's like, okay, stink. Like, what am I doing on my phone? And what should I be doing in person? So I think that's just something I take into consideration. But it was a fun exercise. And after we unpacked it all, they did appreciate it. But it's like, we all have 24 hours in a day. It's just a matter of what we're going to do with it. And I think that's a great challenge for all of us, no matter what role, position, married, unmarried, single, whatever we are. God is giving us time to draw close to him. He's giving us time to build things for his kingdom and not our own. So I don't know. I love how you said that.
Attention management. Yeah.
Attention management. That is so good, Neely. We all love North Central University. That's where I went for undergrad, grad school. Micah went there as well. We all get to teach there. For us, it's adjunct. That is a fun spot. God's movie. What do you see God doing on the campus at North Central?
So this is my 5th year teaching and my 3rd year as technically in a full-time status. And which I love because that means I have advising responsibilities, and that's where relationship is, right?
Wow.
It's in those advising responsibilities. And that that's where the joy is. For me, what is so interesting this year, God's funny. This is the thing about God. I think, we're technically in a season without a named president right now. We're in an interim president situation. And wouldn't not just that be the year where you see more students coming for prayer, more students leaning in on their faith, more students actually, from, I would say, like a nominal faith background, choosing to grow, in this time in their season. I just went through all the evaluations, and the amount of times I saw students say, I really appreciated how you opened up class with prayer. I didn't realize it's something we could do. That is, I have found that to be a place to really center and be peaceful, heading into class that made a difference. I mean, I'm really grateful that we're in a country where everybody can exercise their
Yep.
freedom of expression and faith and belief. I'm really grateful that I have academic freedom, at this school where I can choose to talk about all aspects of who I am as a professor and not just have to limit some of it. And, I've done guest teaching at secular universities, and it's wonderful, and I still have deep friendships from that. But I am grateful that I get to speak fully, authentically to who I am, and why I think I've made some of the choices and decisions that I have. So I'm just grateful for North Central. I believe it's one of the only universities in the entire college Christian coalition that's actually in a downtown area.
Hmm.
And I think that that is very unique and special because historically, biblically, God moves in cities.
Hmm.
And so I believe that North Central has a place for another 94 years. So I'm very much here, very committed to the university.
Wow,
I
my
love it.
goodness. One of our passions is young adults, and one of the things that like God did in my life is I was able to graduate from North Central debt free. And so we want young adults to become young and debtless and or to slash student loans or to take on as few as possible. And I just found that to be so doable, whether it was through scholarships, financial aid, working, etc. But you are like in the blend of, and I'm a geek and
Mhm.
like this is a master class, but I'm nerding out. But as you see the overlap of higher education, the economy, things are definitely changing in our world. And what are your thoughts or what are you observing on the economy and student loans specifically right now?
You know, um, I think that has to be talked about like in two different ways. There actually three, maybe three different ways. There's student loan debt that was taken on. Okay, let me back it all the way up. Inherently, student loans make sense to me because they provide a short-term, call it pain for a long-term gain, right? I
Hmm.
mean, we're
Hmm.
talking, let's say you pay off your loans in those 10 years, you're working 40, and there was a time in a season when you truly did need, in fact, that qualification, that certification, that knowledge base to get you to that earning level that you will get more than you can possibly imagine for the return on your education. I agree. I think North Central is a really good value, for a private school education where you can be seen, known, and grown by adults and not just, teaching assistants and, actually people who have networks that can extend their networks to kind of change the
Mhm.
trajectory of people's financial outcomes. I,
Wow.
I think that we are unique in a beautiful university, and we are immensely good stewards, I think, to people's funds, for what they get over the lifetime. And I think that's verified actually in the data that we collect. That said, there are also organizations that I think have probably jacked up the cost of their university
Hmm.
unnecessarily,
Hmm.
maybe because they want fabulously beautiful brand new facilities. They want fabulously beautiful, this dining hall with the 4,200 million options and optionalities. Like there's the cost of education itself has really risen substantially since we changed how we did our student loans in 2010. it used to be that the student loan was privatized basically, and now it basically is backed by the U.S. government. And on that flip, I think it gave kind of like inflationary permission
Mm,
to continue to increase the cost of education because who's going to allow the U.S. government to go under? And that's unfortunate. It's like the well-intentioned, but like not great for the outcome of what's happened. So the cost of education has just gone up dramatically in that time frame. I think at one point I was like a 13% compound annual growth rate of just the cost of tuition before we had the tuition or before we had the inflation issue in
Wow.
2021. So that's substantial. And I think about that often. And I think about how actually are we setting students up for what reality isn't?
wow.
That's good.
Right? Like when you graduate and you realize you have to, eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches again
Mm-hmm.
just to kind of make budget, um, when it was all there for you. And I want to be clear, I'm not calling for food insecurity because I'm actually deeply passionate about food security and actively participate in making sure our students are fed, right? However, food insecurity, by the way, is a huge issue on college campuses, but that's a whole nother issue.
Wow.
And but I think about like, have we made these dorm living scenarios even more palatial, some of these universities that they're paying 60, 70, $80,000 a year for, then they graduate and then they're depressed because their reality isn't matching actually what they just did, or they feel disappointed by their organization. I sometimes think we set ourselves up to fail by altering what reality is when you graduate from college and needing to kind of scrap to get
Mm-hmm.
by a
Gritty.
little bit, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Well, thoughts on you? I mean,
Oh,
because I'm anti-student debt. I know you're a little like on the anti-debt side. I'm not. I actually believe that we can teach people how to take a bet on themselves
for sure.
and then provide them the skills that they need and work on the virtues piece so that they can kind of leapfrog. Like I'm more in that camp. So not debt for debt's sake, but debt to take a bet on yourself, but then using that as an
Yeah.
opportunity to say, now let's go work on you.
Yeah.
Win on that bet.
Oh my gosh. And I'm like, I think that a mortgage is an investment. Home is an investment. I think that an education is an investment. I think that also a business could be an investment. And I think you can go out of control. People every day overbuy and overextend themselves and become house poor. I think people leverage in the business world too much and it becomes overwhelming or negative. And then I think the same thing with student loans. And I think that when it's 1.8 trillion, I go, that's like it should be a subject of conversation or just guidance to your point on advising. And then, but the last thing, what you said about like grittiness, scrappiness, it reminds me of Usain Bolt. And there was this, I think it was a documentary on the Jamaican, like the gym in the world that cranks out the most Olympic athletes in the running category is in Jamaica. It's the same coach of Usain Bolt and I mean just like so they did a study like, okay, what's he doing? What's in the water there? And my expectation of like gym, like what is a gym? And like a track, what is a track? And this coach had, I kid you not, like we have one like it in our garage, like this folding chair, like this old metal, aluminum, like rusted, squeaky, broken a little bit. This was his chair as a coach where he sat and blew the whistle. And they've received plenty in their economy. It could be a lot nicer. It could look like a Lifetime Fitness. You would almost expect like this is going to be like
Gym of gyms.
PCO, Vikings training facility, but it's not, and it's by design so that they don't get too comfortable. And like I don't know. That's what it reminded me of what you said about school, and not that I don't know. There's something there, maybe.
I think it's good.
There's a place for beauty like that I'm going to be clear. I think there's a place for beauty. I think there's a place for, nice. I mean, I live in a nice home, okay? And it's nice, it's comfortable, it's warm. So I'm not like poo-pooing that idea. I think for me though, it's a little bit, what's the intentionality around it? You
Wow.
could have, let me say it this way, you could have a gym for your athletes that have their name and their number carved in wood on that locker door. But if that student isn't called by their name, if they aren't prayed for, if they aren't invested in relationship, if they, aren't listened to about what actually are their fears and have an opportunity to grow and mature and work on those rugged edges towards,
Mhm.
maturity,
Wow.
we have actually failed them.
Wow.
And so, for anybody watching and you're thinking about where to send your kid, right, for college, be sure you're sending your kid to an organization that will actually see, know, and grow your students, and not one that's resting on its laurels of name or name brand,
Mhm.
because nothing else matters in those 4 years in the journey of maturity. It sets them up, those 4 years of college can make or break your 40 years of work and labor. And it's not just network, it's also like, who are you as a leader? Who are you as a human? Are you scaling for good? Or are you scaling for chaos?
Wow.
It matters. And it gets worked out in those 4 years, I think, if it's done well and intentionally.
And I think when you go to a facility or a university, college campus, 2 year, 4 year, private, public, whatever it is, like that you're not just a number on a piece of paper, but you actually are a name and a face in a classroom. And that's what I really appreciate about North Central specifically, was that the professors knew my name. They knew my grade. They knew what I did. They asked questions. They created room and space to speak wisdom into my life. And that was so good. And I did take out student loans, which I don't regret. But when I did take out student loans was it made me get to class because I know why? Because I sat there and I calculated. I'm like, I'm spending X amount of dollars to sit in this class. I'm gonna get an education. I was the nerd that's like, can we have a quiz? Because I actually read. All of you people
I
that
want to
couldn't
get my
read,
money's worth.
I want to get my money's worth. Like I was that annoying person. And granted, I was like 7, 8 years, maybe 10 years old in some of the classrooms. But I'm like, that's what education is. It should challenge me. It should grow me. It should allow me to fail, but not feel like a failure. Like this is the incubator, the space where it's like, when I pray for somebody, I said, hey, I have a word for you. I don't know if it's from you or if it's like for you. I think it is. It's from the Lord. Pray about it. If it's not right, please forgive me. I'm just exercising a spiritual gift that I have here, whether it was that or in one of the ministry classrooms, or maybe it was in one of the business classes. I just think that incubator space allows you to grow, to fail, to experiment. And it's almost like this laboratory where it's like, you know what? For the next 4 years, I'm going to do my very best and I'm going to have community while I'm there. I'm going to do my assignments. I'm going to dedicate myself to this education that I'm paying for, that I want to own and have ownership over because I'm paying for these loans. I don't want these loans to own me. So I look around the classroom. This is something that I want to encourage. Like, if you're a student listening, no matter what program you're in, if you're in marketing, if you're in business, if you're in ministry, look around the classroom. And I asked myself this question when I was going to school for ministry. I was like, okay, Lord, who is a wonderful student here, has a wonderful personality, loves the Lord that I could see myself working for or with someday? And I remember looking around that classroom and I was like disturbed. I'm like, there's probably only two in this class. And I'm like, Lord, who is going to work for me someday if I were to look around? Like, who would I want to work for or with me someday? So I mean, I think it puts it in a perspective, like there's a quality over quantity.
It's good.
And I want the quality education, the quality friendships, the quality teachers, and the quality in the classroom, not this quantity of bragging rights that I went to XYZ and look at me. It's like, okay, but your education and what you're doing with it does not show anything related to what you're claiming. So I don't know, just how we attach ourselves to names. The one name we should attach it to is I'm a believer of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
he's the King, the Lord of Lords, and that's what we want to be known for. Before we get to our last 5 and 5, Neely, I have one more question for you. Is there anything else that's on your heart for young adult leaders or young adults at large today?
Yeah, it's practice presence and gratitude. I think there's no more humbling things than practicing presence and gratitude, you know, to be it puts you, I think, in the right human posture, you know, for that human dignity piece. Um, it's and probably I'm projecting. I think we talk a lot about what builds trust in our leadership class, and we identify what our wobbles are. That's what we call it, our wobbles. And you know, I have a little bit of an empathy wobble because I am so time focused. So I'm always like thinking
Wow.
about time. And so if anything interrupts my time, right, it ends up being um like a you know a little twitch, you know, kind of a little twitch of my productivity. But at the same time, when I do give the gift of presence, I think my students realize that it is in fact a gift. And similarly, I need to treat it that way so that it doesn't feel anything less than a gift. So I think practicing presence with one another is really key and critical. And it's an area I'm continuously working on in my own life. And then gratitude. I think we can sit here and say, oh, I'm thankful for this. But when you actually sit down and you write a 3 to 5 sentence thank you handwritten note to someone to actually put those words in and find their address and get the stamp and send it out, right? That is the full act of gratitude. And I think that's always fitting and right. So, yeah, presence and gratitude.
Oh my gosh.
Awesome.
Can you say more about wobbles? I love studying leadership, and that's one of my takeaways. I take it it's like a wobble is like an area of imbalance, or say more about that.
So, Dr. Frances Fry out of Harvard, who I and very much adore as probably one of the best minds of leadership in our modern era right now. She wrote a book called Unleashed, and it is probably some of the absolute best content on leadership for me that I have seen. It starts with the definition of leadership is what do you leadership is what you do in your presence that extends in your absence. So you're not you don't get to say you're a good leader until you leave the room and see what happens, right?
Good.
And I think when we realize that it's in our absence that leadership is actually scaled. It's in our absence that the work gets done, right? It's the absence that the creativity gets unleashed, right? It's how you invested in your presence in that moment that actually unleashes that in your absence. That's the only way to scale leadership is to be very intentional. In that, she breaks down several models, but one of them is her infamous. She has a 6 million, 9 million view TED Talk on this, how to build and rebuild trust. It's hands down one of the best TED Talks
Wow.
I personally have ever watched. And she talks about the trust triangle, which is effectively from Aristotle. It's the three persuasions. It's logos, pathos, ethos,
Hmm.
and you know it gets reworked to authenticity, logic, or what we call sometimes rigor, and empathy. And so identifying how so trust isn't one thing; it's actually three things, and it's all three things coming together. So if you wobble on your authenticity, are you who you say you are privately is who you are publicly? Does everyone experience the same version of you? It's when people aren't experiencing the same version of you that you need to go do some work on why that is and like why you are feeling different, that you're showing up differently in those different spheres. Then there's logic and rigor, skills, you know, can you deliver on the things that you claim that you can deliver? And then empathy, does someone care about me and my outcome? And, you know, even just looking at a phone in a conversation can trigger someone's lack of empathy, right? In that moment. So I think sometimes when we think about trust, we think it's this like weird, ethereal, you know,
Hmm.
either you have it or you don't. I think it's more clinical than that. I think you can break it down to, okay, what area of those three are causing the untrustworthiness? And now do I have to ask more questions about that area, either in someone else or of myself? It's probably one of the absolute most effective tools that I teach in leadership.
This feels like a leadership tool for all pastors, anybody in the leadership sphere at large, of just really walking through those three different things and watching that TED Talk. I'm going to go do that actually.
Oh my gosh.
This is so good.
We want to honor your time, so I
Don't
know
want to make you wobble.
yeah. Are you okay still doing the 5 and 5? If
We're
not,
good. We're good. We could do the five. Let's do the
okay.
five.
This
Yeah.
Neil, this is like next level as far as like that masterclass that you just gave. So many takeaways. A few of mine have been attention, attention, like to do an attention audit, and then that trust triangle. We'll link that TED Talk in the show notes. But five final thoughts, 5 minutes on the clock. Number one, what's a goal that you have that you'd share for 2025, a new year?
I would like to not snack after 8 p.m.
Oh, girl, I'm
That's
right there with
hard.
you.
I
I'm a
love
grazer.
I love late night snacks, and I need to just not snack, okay, after 8 p.m.
Oh my
It
goodness.
probably should be 5 p.m., but I'm just gonna try 8 p.m.
Are
first.
you crunchy or sweet? Like, what's your go-to?
All of it.
All of it. Okay.
That's the problem. Like I need to be given some sort of allergy or something, but I don't. I
Careful
like
what
it
you ask
all.
for, Lord. No. All right, here's question number
Deal with
two.
me gently, Lord. Deal with
Yeah.
me gently, right? You
I'm
gotta add
allergic. Cake
gently in
makes
there.
me explode. I love Jumanji. Anyway, number two, what's a hobby you enjoy doing for fun?
I truly do not have hobbies. Like I just love working. I really do.
Mhm.
I'm someone who just loves working. I love working, and I will work probably to the day I die. So I know it's not what you want to hear, but it's the reality of it. If I'm
Yeah, but
not
you're loving what
working,
you're
I'm reading
doing.
about something related to work, right? It's just like it's always on.
Oh my
I
goodness.
get it.
He
What
gets it.
about if you could ask Micah and I anything? This is the opportunity in the show, and you've already done it, but the guest becomes the host. If you could ask us one thing, what would you want to know?
Who are you? What are you doing on a Monday morning when you're 60 years old? And how did you get there?
Oh my gosh.
What am I doing at 60 years old? Oh my goodness. Who am I? I would like to say that I don't feel like we're ever going to retire just because ministry, discipleship, like that's at the forefront of our mind. We're passionate about investing in people around us. So I would see it as something where I am physically involved. I don't care if it's pickleball, tennis, something fun. Um, Maybe it's a mission trip. Who knows what's happening on a Monday morning? But even this morning, like I was blaring worship music downstairs, and I'm like the loud one where my car is like vibrating around me. But now that I have kids, I can't listen to loud music. But it's like the subwoofers were going on downstairs this morning. I was like, I just need time, like half an hour just to worship. So I just pray that my worship and fervor for the Lord continues to grow. Um, yeah, and doing that with the word of God and a cup of coffee and just no other things except for the worship going on around me and just the word of God coming alive. I think that's a part of who I want to be and become in the process.
Oh my gosh. I've not been asked this question before, but I know life goes really fast. I'm about um, halfway and change there. And so I know this first half has gone pretty fast. So to look at that, I would say I am deeply burdened about young adults, college students, 18 to 30-year-olds, the vehicles, whether it's pastor, professor, mentor, coach,
Mhm.
friend, guide, doesn't matter, but I pray and hope that there's young people, maybe our kids or future grandkids would be included in the mix. But I want my life to be about the glory of God, the good of other people, and sharing about what He's done and being a friend. Like 2/3, what is it? Barna says something like 2/3 of young adults don't have a caring adult in their
Mhm.
life. And if I can just be one of those
Mhm.
in the great cloud of witnesses to I had this mentor in my life, Neely, and went to the state fair, was trying to earn a Marine shirt pull-up
Mhm.
booth. I was probably 20 years old, and you needed 25 pull-ups, and I got 24, and my grip went out, fell, slipped. And this older gentleman, he's since gone to be with Jesus, but he goes, "Get back up there,
Well, he
do it
wasn't
again."
going to let you settle for the pencil.
Yeah, that would have been my award was the pencil. And he goes, "Get back up there, you can do it." And so I switched grip, got 25, and I couldn't have done that, and I wouldn't have. I would have just walked away sad, but somebody knew that there was more in me,
Mm.
called out greatness. And if I can do that for the next generation, I feel like that's what I'm passionate about, called to want. That's who I want to become.
That's good.
Really good. You
So
should wear that
good.
shirt every episode.
I don't know if he has it anymore,
I
do
don't
you?
think I have it. Is that bad?
You're gonna have to go do this push-ups again or pull-ups.
This summer. Oh my goodness. Okay, question number 4, Neely, is what's your dream in a sentence?
Gosh, that's such a big question. Um, I believe firmly that the ultimate form of justice, social justice, whatever you want to say, is the opportunity to say yes or no to anything, right? Like the ability to say yes or no to me is the ultimate form
Wow.
of what you do with your time, right? Is the
Hmm.
ultimate form of social justice. So my dream in many ways is to help whoever, literally whoever wants to go on a journey of how you can get to that from a financial perspective. Um, because I actually think that's the ultimate form of social justice is the ability to say yes or no to anything at any given point in time.
It's so good.
And yeah, so my dream is to be part of that journey for like you for young people, me also for young people, but actually mid-career people too. I get a lot of calls from mid-career people on that as well because I made a change mid-career, as well. And there's there's a lot of peace that can come with that ability to say yes or no, hopefully done prayerfully and in discernment, of course. But then that provides presence for others. So that's how do you scale your absence
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing? Like the ability to just be present with people and invest and plant the seeds, similar to you, probably in parallel process to you.
Hmm.
But how do we do that? How do we get more people to unlock their insight and wisdom about like what they actually have in them to do more? I think we're all better off if we can do that with each other.
Come on. That's so good.
That's such like a thought-provoking idea for me. I'm still trying to like
That's my
catch up
blank
to that.
stare. So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
sitting here staring
That is
blankly. That's why.
incredible. What a thought. What about this? If there was a room filled with young adults, young leaders, is there one piece of encouragement or advice or insight? And it might be different day to day, but today, what would you want them to know or be encouraged by?
I I'm sensitive when I say this, but I I know that in common Christian circles we're supposed to call them to be heaven-minded. I actually am going to say you need to be grave-minded. Like we all will pass.
Mm-hmm.
No one has been able to 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 figure out how not to die at this point. The question is how many points on the board do you want to put? Like, are you ready for it? Are you ready? Literally, are you ready? Are you living your such way life in such a way that brings honor to your name and to the name of those who have invested around you on that last day? And I think sometimes we treat each other with too much gentleness, and I think we need to have a little bit of a tough love talk around like how you spend your days absolutely has an impact on your life. And it goes back to that attention management, sort of comment. So it's that visualization. I will sometimes do that same question with students.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you at the age of 60 and what are you doing on a Monday morning? And when they start unpacking it, I mean, you guys have already been married, you already have kids, right? But they're 18, 19, 20, 22, right? And it's interesting. They'll say things like, well, I want to probably have grandkids. Okay, well, how'd that happen?
Work backwards.
I, I guess I got married. I guess I had kids. Yes. Okay. How'd that happen? Okay, I got married. Okay. Oh, so you stayed married, right? Okay. How did you stay married? How'd you practice how to be patient with one another? Where did that come in? You know, and you start unpacking it, and they realize, yeah, checking my phone in the middle of class probably doesn't practice patience. Yep, you're right. So, there's like, I think if we get future casting, future minded, maybe it's heaven minded, maybe it's grave minded, maybe it's both, right? I think it puts a lot of things in perspective, and hopefully our habits will change, and maybe we'll eat fewer snacks after 8 p.m. So I'm
All of
challenging
us.
myself with it.
Oh, all of us. That's right. Neely,
Challenge
thank you
accepted.
so much for this amazing conversation. This has been nothing but a blessing to me, to Josiah, and I know the listener is definitely going to lean into this one as well. So thank you so much for your time.
It's my joy. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
Wow, this is like just fantastic. I nerded out on this one,
Speechless.
but you're also a fantastic follow on X or Twitter, so we'll link that. Any other resources that you want us to link to?
No, I think you're good. X is a decent place. I've been a little quieter lately on there, but yeah, X is good, and always happy to connect if someone wants to nerd out on the economy, or Jesus, like, right? Spreadsheets or Jesus, go ahead, give me a call.
I love it.
Amazing. Hey, this is the Young Adults Today podcast.
Hey, everybody, this is Micah with Young Adults Today. Just a couple reminders, as well as we have a March event. March 7th and 8th is our leadership conference. That's for people leading 18 to 30-year-olds, whether you're a volunteer, whether you're a pastor, or whether you're just passionate about young adults at large. We'd love to see you there.
It's one small step for man.
Neil Armstrong sets foot on the moon.
One giant leap for mankind.
Sometimes one small step can lead to a giant leap. If you have a call to change the world for Christ, GFA World invites you to their ministry apprenticeship program. Take one small step. Log on to gfa.org/apprenticeship. Go to gfa.org/apprenticeship.